Well, so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I made a video regarding one of these so-called anti-racist educators. I use the term educator quite lightly. The one in question being the individual who, in her spare time or when she's not participating in the Building Racial Literacy program and promoting global citizenship, etc., etc., she also worked with autistic children. I expressed an element of concern at the time regarding the fact that it seemed a bit sketchy that she would be involved in an environment with children that are in need of additional help while simultaneously promoting what I would describe as cancerous bile. Irrespective of whether or not she simply justifies herself by saying that she simply promotes anti-racism, which of course is the sort of precursor to building racial literacy / critical race theory, that to me is irrelevant. But here she is again, and it's nice to see that it still says in her bio, and I'm not blocked miraculously, teacher of amazingly gifted young people, PT inclusion, diversity and anti-racist culture. Fucking hell. Fucking teacher, she's got that in the bio. Also says that she loves maths, she loves chess, she loves diversity. Just goes to show though what sort of crap is being taught in some of these schools when they undertake or adopt this way of thinking, where it says ask Angel, PT inclusion, diversity and cultural inclusion at Drumchapel High School. Mrs. Hinckley, here are 4 final thoughts for the session. Plenty of food for thought during the summer break. Right? And then we have the main focus of the Equality and Equity Working Group is anti-racism, diversity, LGBTQ+, gender, learning differences, and the door is always open to any staff wanting to join our working group. You know, if I was in that environment, I probably would join it, but I wouldn't be joining it for the right reasons. Oh, no. I'd be keeping a fucking eye on you, if I'm honest. I'd be keeping an eye on this fucking group in general. I mean, what a list, what a myriad of different topics to be discussed at an equity and equality group. Sounds riveting. Sounds absolutely riveting. A few examples of how our school can make a difference. Pupil Voice, for example, the Anti-Racist Society. CPD, in brackets Continual Professional Development, or CLPL, Career Long Professional Learning, engage in discussions with other staff members and young people. Decolonising the curriculum, collaboration with other schools who are implementing similar shit, and collaboration with parents, get them involved, of course, soften them up so they understand exactly what's taking place here. Yeah, her preferred pronouns, as if anybody really cares, but it looks good. This is bizarre. Third image, courtesy of this Twitter account, from Angel, Ask Angel. Being anti-racist is very important because it shows that we are actively working to end racism. Being passive and saying racism does not exist, I don't see colour, will not result in change or equality. Oh, okay. Again, it's this idea that a colourblind society is not acceptable. So you need to approach a colourblind society, approach children or teenagers that might not necessarily have given race a second thought, introduce the concept to them in order to then present them this redefined variation of the word, and then push for equity under the guise of equality. I don't see colour. Will not result in change of equality. But if the society in question, this hypothetical society, is colourblind, they don't see colour, then where's the issue? That's right, disparities, isn't it? Yeah. And then they go on to say that race is a social construct. Well, it was created to dehumanise BIPOCs. And then they've got in brackets black, indigenous and people of colour. So again, every group is encompassed into the one banner. This is again an American concept taken from American universities. And it's just been copy and pasted and slap bang straight into Scottish society, into Scottish academia. BIPOC. Do we not have a claim to this land? No. No. The laugh of the matter is the people that they insist are indigenous. We've got more of a claim to this land than these people have to those lands. Which is quite remarkable, really. But we don't want to talk about that. No, we can't talk about that. It's deeply ingrained, and we're working to undo it so that we can build a truly equal society. We can only bring about positive change if we all work together. Every one of us, will make mistakes. You know, this is a common talking point that I hear every single time I end up on this subject. We will all make mistakes, you know. It's part and parcel with anti-racism. It's part and parcel with our journey. You know, if I was going to anger management, I would not expect the therapist to make mistakes from time to time. If I was going to counselling for help with my depression or my anxiety, I would not expect the person that was paid to sit and listen to me for an hour and clock watch to make mistakes from time to time. I would expect them to be relatively skilled in their job, trained and efficient, you know, hence why I'm there in the first place. Why is the same not true when it comes to these so-called anti-racist educators? That you're not racially literate enough, is that where Melina steps in? Some may become defensive, reasoning, I am not racist. If you're experiencing these emotions, remember that we're all working together to dismantle the social construct of race. It's not a place of judgment, it's a place for learning, compassion, kindness, and looking out for one another. Even if you want to eradicate the concept of race altogether, you be my guest. That still does not eradicate the concept of ethnicity. And by and large, I would say that that's somewhat more important when we're talking about nation by nation basis. Fantastic day of building racial literacy facilitator training. Excited to get started in August. Build the sustainability of the programme and increase capacity in its delivery to allow anti-racist professional learning to be made available across Scotland. Cohort 1. Co-construct the prototype and apply to support future delivery. Recruit LA officers who have more capacity to influence on system. Sustained engagement with alumni and their spheres of influence, supporting ongoing learning and action, which will then lead to programme co-owned more widely, not just by Education Scotland and race equality and anti-racism in the education programme, thus leading to every educator in Scotland being racially literate and not race evasive. Anti-racism becomes a baseline professional value, and educators are empowered to identify and implement anti-racist behaviours and processes in their everyday practice. So essentially, as I've said before, what the overall intention of the Building Racial Literacy programme is that in time, hypothetically speaking, to have this part of every single teacher's training. Every teacher will be quote unquote racially literate. Every single teacher will have the capacity and the knowledge to begin implementing critical race theory if need be. It's not just a case of teaching them about anti-racism, because by and large, racial literacy in and of itself, defined by Melina, the creator of this fucking programme, on her old website, clearly indicates that it's a lot more than just what you would be led to believe. And it says you're great to collaborate with Navan Gavander and Melina and Education Scotland PLL tonight, sharing the anti-racist critical thinking model and how to apply critical thinking to our planning and school ethos. And then we can learn more about the model. What a riveting way to conclude my day. Citizenship Education, Scotland. The aim being to bring together a variety of resources and links to help so-called educators and leaders of education successfully embed the values and knowledge of global citizenship, sustainability, and anti-racist education into their daily teaching. We offer a one-stop shop of resources, professional development, opportunities, articles, lesson exemplars to help embed this practice. The beauty of anti-racism is that you don't have to pretends to be free of racism to be an anti-racist. An anti-racist, or anti-racism, sorry, is the commitment to fight racism wherever you find it, including in yourself, and that's the only way forward. Is that so? I have to be honest, it's somewhat sad in many respects that so many of these BAME individuals spend their entire career, their entire adult lifespan, up until this point, focusing solely on shite that doesn't exist. But for the most part, the majority of them know that to be the case anyway. As I've said before, a lot of them are just opportunists. They know exactly what they're angling for, and they know exactly how they're going to achieve their goals. But it's just the waffle that they come away with. Examples of anti-racism. Not scrolling past headlines about racism. Sharing stories of racism. Building understanding of racism. And learning traditional views and teachings to incorporate new learning based on the lived experiences of the victims of racism. So, in other words, if I'm correct, what that fourth point is suggesting is that we have to eradicate what you thought you knew about racism. Then you have to listen to Spiel. You have to listen to their redefined variations of what racism is. You have to be introduced to all the new concepts, all the new definitions. And then when you have listened to their lived experiences and their experiences of microaggressions that are so rampant and rife, you then in turn learn new views. You then learn to their way of thinking. You essentially adopt their worldview, questioning and being a critical thinker when judging a lesson or resource. One's kind of love to self-aggrandise and insinuate that they're very big brains, and this is all about critical thought. It's all about thinking deeply, thinking beyond the text on screen, etc, etc. Yet a myriad of these individuals seem to be retweeting to no end, post after post after post, about Black Lives Matter and Sheku Bayu, despite the fact the case hasn't come to any conclusions yet. But it's just assumed because he was black, died in police custody, that it's due to the fact he was black. Therefore it must be racism. Therefore that justifies Black Lives Matter. So much critical thought is going into that. Oh, Jesus. Reflecting on traditional approaches. We may think that we are being inclusive when celebrating world cultures, but is that the only time we talk about minority groups? Is that the only time we talk about minority groups? Fucking hell. There is a danger of negative stereotyping and creating an atmosphere of othering. Do we stop to consider how people of colour are portrayed in our images or texts? Instead, we should include contributions of diverse communities across all aspects of the curriculum in a positive and inspiring way. What do to decolonise? Oh, this will be a belter, I'm sure. Traditionally, our curriculum is Eurocentric, written about the world and its people from the perspective of coloniser nations. There's a few things wrong with that. Foremost, traditionally, you mean the way it's always been, because this is Scotland, therefore our curriculum is going to be designed from the perspective of a Scotsman, or Scots people in general, or British people. It's hardly going to be written from the perspective of a brown woman from fucking India who was born in England. It's hardly going to be designed from the worldview of a Japanese individual or the Japanese. It's hardly going to be designed from the worldview of a Kenyan or a Nigerian. Of course, it's going to be designed from a Scottish or a British perspective, and by extension, a Eurocentric perspective. And yet again, this is another example of them pointing to something that's actually intrinsically normal by and large, but it's something that never gets thought about. So when they bring attention to it, it allows them to kind of open the door and start to deconstruct it and make it appear as if it's something unacceptable or wrong in any capacity. The reality of the matter is, you just point to any part of the world of designing their own curriculum, the chances are that their curriculum will be based around their people, and it will write about the world and other people from their own perspective, the same way as we here have done historically or traditionally. But yet, it's written in such a manner as if that's an issue, because if it's an issue, it then justifies change, or the calls for change. Jesus Christ. To decolonise is not about deleting knowledge or histories that have been developed in the West or colonial nations. Rather, it is to situate the histories and knowledges that do not originate from the West in the context of imperialism, colonialism, and power, and to consider why these have been marginalised and decentered. Professor Rowena Ashrad. And apparently, it's an approach to free our minds and our curriculum from this colonial ideology. Oh, fucking hell. It's one thing for these people to have these belief systems, be my guest, but again, it's important to remember that these individuals have always been hell-bent on targeting our youth, and now they are in the position, courtesy of the Scottish Government, to begin that fucking process. Injustice is not only visible through financial benefit, but more importantly to do with the power imbalance in the world. Power is the sense of dependency that some groups have been forced into by others. Power imbalance. Critical thinking encourages us to ask why the world is the way it is. Who dominates the narrative and why? Oh, fucking hell. And again, it's just fucking well. The narrative. Who dominates the narrative? Power imbalances. An anti-racist critical thinking model, step-by-step thinking process that encourages practitioners to question and reflect, with a planning tool to help analyse our traditional approaches and dominant perspectives, and a framework to help link teaching and learning experiences with a modern, progressive 21st century Scotland. Why have you chosen this resource? Whose perspective is it from? Whose perspective is missing? Why is it missing? Who does it impact? What does it link with modern Scotland? With an example in the years World War II. I can discuss why people and events from a particular time in the past were important, placing them with the historical sequence. As a key player in the war, we chose to teach about these examples because they help us to set out the background of the wars, who was involved, and help us to understand why what happened happens. Okay. Additionally, we promote the European view, the difficulties of the European people, their challenges, their stories of families being separated, their sacrifices, their celebrations. Decolonising does not mean that these stories and sacrifices are not important, but they are not the only ones. The education system has developed in a society based on racism, willing to continue the colonial legacy of oppression over people of colour and colonised nations. Our predecessors created the curriculum carefully to keep portraying an image of greatness of the empire and its legacy. Had we taught about the contributions of such communities in the war effort, showing the value they deserved, would such racist images have been the norm? I've had enough. Peace.